go into business. I know a lot of people who are watching care about business, so we'll go straight there. Gap selling took off. When was that? When did you author that officially and publish?
December of 2018. So you figure what
is that? It 18?
That's it.
Dang, dude. It's like one of the top grossing sales books out there, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, look, they don't publish that stuff, but there's enough anecdotal evidence, and you hear about other books, et cetera, that, other than maybe Fanatical Prospecting and Challenger Sale, I don't know of any other books from a sales perspective that have done this well. I mean, we're about to pass 120,000 copies.
I got one of them for sure.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
What's up with the business side of it, though? So you've obviously, were you an author first, then built the business, or were you business first, then created the book?
Business first. So, well, I guess it depends on how you define that, right? So it's interesting. We talk about journeys, right? I started 3 businesses before I started what is now a sales growth company. It used to be a sales guy, but a sales growth company. And they all failed. This one, and I set out deliberately, I'm starting a company. I have a company. I'm starting an idea. Like I had them and I went.
Yep.
This one was, maybe I should do this, right? So it's funny how things come around. But the long and the short of it is I started blogging in 2009.
Okay.
What prompted me to start blogging was my career. I didn't start my career until I was 27. 2009, I was only 40, maybe 41. And is that right? No. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I can't count. So in 98, I was 30. Yeah. Okay. So I was about 40.
Boom.
Right? Is that right?
That's right. 2009, 40.
2008, I would have been 40. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was about 40. I don't know why it really matters. But anyways, I'd only been working for about 13 years. But every time I needed a new job, my career took off. I went from basically a nobody when I was 27 to running a $300-something million business with 150 people reporting to me in just 3 years.
Okay.
And I had a hard time keeping that level because at the time you're still using resumes. LinkedIn really wasn't a thing yet. And every time I had to get a new job, it took me 6 months, and I fought like tooth and nail to hang on to where I was because everybody just wanted to push me down. You know what I'm saying? Career's not long enough. I don't, blah, blah. So anyways, I figured, you know what? I'm going to use this blog thing in 2009. I'm going to write about sales, what I'm doing in sales, how I'm building my sales teams, blah, blah, blah. And the idea was if I got 1,000 people to follow the blog, if I ever needed a job, I would just post, hey, y'all, I'm thinking about moving or I'm out of a gig. And they would have followed me and known, like my idea was don't tell people through a resume, show people.
Yep.
So that's what the original intent was. But from 2009 to 2011, it blew up. My blog got more and more popular. I got invitations to speak. I was at all these different conferences, made all these lists, top sales blog, top sales influencer, blah, 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 and all that bullshit. And then people started calling me, asking me if I did consulting.
Cool.
And so at first I had another job, so I'd say no. And this was the time when people didn't understand reach. So my boss was like, no, you can't have another, you can't take that stuff on. But then we got purchased by a company out of England, and they let the entire U.S. sales team go, and I was vice president of sales strategy and operations. So I was out of job. So I was like, okay, I have 6 months. It always takes me 6 months to a year to get a job if I don't want to go back and take a step back. So that I could spend that 6 months betting on myself and see if I can build a consulting practice out of this or go find a job.
Got it.
I was like, it was a no-brainer for me. I was like, because I went back to those people that reached out and said, do you do consulting? Because this is before the idea of a fractional CRO, you know what I'm saying? So I just one client at a time built the business. And man, I remember I did like maybe 100,000 the first year, and then like 200,000 the next year, and then like 300,000. Ooh, I'm kind of busy, got an assistant. And it just kept going. And as it kept going, people started asking to do training. And I was like, nah, I don't do training. And this is my quote. I'll never forget it. I don't do training. I have no interest in building a training that rehashes the same old bullshit as everybody else. I saw no differentiation. But then 7 or 8 years into it, I started to see what I was teaching. I started to see what I was learning. I won't bore you with the story any longer, but I looked back at a lot of my writings in the blog, and I started to see this theme. And then one day at a client, I got frustrated with the salesperson. I said, man, you don't get it. And I ran up to the whiteboard and I said, look, the customer's here right now. And they're pissed about something. Something's not working, and they need to change. And they want to go here. No. So you're going to tell me, how big is the space in between here, and why does it matter? And I threw all that on the board. And I said, so now go figure this shit out because I'm tired of the same stuff you're sharing with me. And I sat down, I looked on the board and ooh,
Gap.
that's good, the gap. So from there, then I wrote the book, and that's when, I mean, I always did well. I could have stayed where I was, made a decent living, would have been happy, but wrote Gap and took off.
What's the goal? Where do you take it?
I want Gap selling to be the 21st century version of Sandler. And what I mean by that is not from a thesis or not from a content perspective. But look, I give Davidson all the credit in the world. I mean, from 1966 to basically even now, he revolutionized the way people look at selling and built a pretty decent, had a major influence on the sales world.
Yeah.
I want Gap selling to be that thing, in our goal is to change the way the world sells. That's literally what we say all the time. Change the way the world sells.
Are you guys still in like the infantile stage of that, or are you guys fairly well established now?
How would you define that?
How would you define it?
Well, I don't know because you asked the question. So are we established or not? So to answer your question, I'd be curious how you define it.
On your timeline of your ultimate goal, where do you sit?
Oh, we're in the early stages. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where is that downstream? So
ideally,
do we quantify?
Ideally, we'd like to have about 50 to 80 independent Gap selling trainers in the marketplace. So we have a licensing division where we have people who pay us a license. We train them, we certify them in Gap selling, but they have their own business and they're able to go out and drive their own business and go out and sell Gap selling as a licensed trainer. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. But it's their business. So we'd like to have about 80 to 85 of those people out there doing it. And then that what I like about that is, I may or may not be involved, but now it's on its own. Like Gap selling is standing on its own. It's not me or my small team, but we have a whole crew of people out there.
And you guys solely growing through the brand that you've built on Gap selling? Like what is the growth mechanism for the practice itself?
100% growing on the brand. Mm-hmm.
Let's go down the outbound path because we talked about this a little bit.
Yep.
You told me, I asked you, do you believe in outbound sales? You said I used to.
Mm-hmm.
Elaborate.
I'm not seeing the return on investment.
Yep.
Whether it's a full service rep or whether it's an SDR, BDR, I'm just not seeing the return that it once had. And primarily, and I know you said this why you bought this company and you're getting 30% connect rate, so I want to talk to you. But primarily because of connect rates. And I will go toe to toe with some, if you call it different, there's so many people out there who are hanging on saying, you can affect call rate, connect rates. No, you can't. Now you have a special software that does things, I'm down.
Sure.
But when we talk about control and victim and non-victim, people aren't picking up their phones. People are not reading their emails or not giving the emails in time. So my experience with not only with my clients, but also with us, that you can make small improvements, but the amount of time, effort, and money to drive a sale from an outbound is becoming less and less efficient.
Yeah,
and
100%.
In my company, now granted, we've done a good job from the brand beginning. I'd rather take all that money and triple down on brand development, triple down on content creation, triple down on educational, and you know what I'm saying? Triple down on that shit and watch the business come in. Because not only is it hard to get people to connect, but then it's hard to get them to have a meeting. And then once you even have the meeting, the close rates for outbound versus inbound are substantially lower. So, I'm okay with building a complete inbound engine.
Yeah, actually, I just did a webinar on outbound profitability because what I'm seeing is there's been a massive shift in the past 3 or 4 years in outbound. To your point, it's not profitable. There's a lot of contributing factors to that. One is I think people are hanging on to the predictable revenue era of 2010 when Aaron Ross wrote his book. What people don't realize about Aaron Ross's book, I think it's total bullshit, by the way. I don't think the model's bullshit. I think Aaron's smart. But what people don't realize is when he introduced the SDR, account executive model, Salesforce had a brand.
Yep.
People think that you just replicate the model, you get the same results. No, Salesforce had a brand.
Yep.
Sales rep costs were substantially less.
Yep.
Like disproportionate to inflation, right? Technology stacks were limited.
Yep.
And people answered the phone.
Yep.
Right?
That's the key piece right there. People answer the phone.
Yes. And so what I say is with commoditization comes saturation. Or excuse me, with saturation comes commoditization. Or even worse, with automation comes saturation, comes commoditization.
Yes.
What I'm noticing is an outbound profitability problem is sales rep costs are way up, way inflated, right? Technology stacks are way bloated, meaning you got more reps, you have more user licenses, you are paying a substantial amount more for your tech stack that's not giving you an outsized return for what you just brought on from 100%. An expense perspective. Deliverability is down, phone, email, et cetera. Even social. LinkedIn's trash for DMs and that. I don't even subscribe to it, to be honest. And on top of that, you've got macroeconomics at play that I think are playing a big role in this. And so cost to acquire customers now outsized. But the reason I'm asking this question, couple things. The answer to me is do the fundamentals, do them at scale, do them consistently, do them over time. Right? So far too many of us, one, we don't subscribe to the fundamentals, which we can dialogue on what that is. I believe the fundamentals is list, message, rep, follow-up. 4 things. And timing is kind of a 5th one. So we've gotten, because data has become so commoditized, ZoomInfo, Apollo, Seamless, all these tools that tout this data accessibility. Data is now a commodity, which means everyone has access to it. And so targeting has gone way down. We don't know who we sell to anymore because it's so easy to just go rip a list down that has this demographic site, right? So we don't have, we're not zoning on ICPs, our ideal customers. Rep or message, we don't tailor our message to the buyer. To your point, like where are they at? Like I'm a challenger sale kind of guy. Gap selling as well to some degree. not to talk about competition, but I actually don't care that much about challenger sale. I like challenger customer. Have you read that?
Yeah.
So what I love about challenger customer is this idea of commercial insight. What is it that the client or prospect doesn't understand about their own business that forces them to devalue your strengths?
Yes.
And that's oftentimes the gap, right? To your point of like, okay, where are they currently at? Where do they want to go? There's this education piece on the gap. You got to sell to that gap. So fusing the two models together. So that's message. You got to tailor the message. And we all talk about product market fit. We don't talk enough about message market fit. And then from there you got rep. So right now the rep has been commoditized despite what they cost. To your point earlier, managers aren't investing in them. Training is not accessible. We throw technology at problems and not actually get to the root of the issue. And so we have these reps who it takes 3.5 months to ramp, which is ridiculous. 3.5 months to ramp. It takes 14 months to attain quota. It takes 18 months to churn. The math ain't mathing.
Nope.
Math doesn't math. So we have 4 months of a quota attaining rep if we get there. And we're looking at the statistic, I saw it on RepView, where it talked about Q1 of 2022 had a 53% quota attainment. Q3 of 2023, just 6 quarters later, 43%.
That's not good.
That ain't mathing either.
Nope.
And so we're not changing anything and expecting the same results as we used to get or better. And the last is follow-up. I don't know how much you talk about follow-up with your training. I'm sure it's huge, but the stat on follow-up is probably the most alarming. 80% of deals require 5 or more touch points on opportunities to close. 71% of reps make 1 or fewer follow-ups.
That's ridiculous.
Math doesn't
That's
math.
ridiculous. Yeah.
So you combine all of this plus macroeconomics, and you have a shit show of profitability. And so it has to come back to, well, what is the answer? Fundamentals that scale consistently over time. So I'd be curious because something else that's interesting is we saw a shift go from outbound to demand gen. Demand gen, ebooks, webinars, cheap cost per lead model to acquire leads. But when you actually run a profitability analysis side by side, outbound, not very profitable against demand gen's twice as unprofitable.
Why?
Let's just take it cost per lead. So if a cost per lead in an outbound environment's $800, shit, that's a lot. Cost per lead in a demand gen environment's $140. Like, okay.
Why? How much cost does it take to create those things?
The friction is so much less, right? Because we believe in intent, and we believe in all these different mechanisms. It's easier to opt into an ebook than it is to convert on a cold call.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. To conversion metrics. But to your point on close rates, this is a study run by Chris Walker of Refine Labs. So he's got a bunch of data on demand gen. $140 to $150 lead on demand gen with a 0.3% conversion into customer. So that takes 333 leads at $150 a pop. That's $57,000 to acquire a $30,000 customer. Math doesn't math. And so to your point on brand, brand is more important than ever. And brand should affect demand gen. It should affect outbound. So if you're investing heavily in brand, to Aaron Ross's book that he doesn't talk about, but he should, is Salesforce had a brand behind their outbound. And that's what made outbound more profitable, among other things. So if you're looking at organizations, and not everyone can invest in brand, like you have a personal brand. Personal brands are more powerful than company brands, historically, outside of Apple and a few. How is it that companies can be developing pipe today without having the firepower of a personal brand?
Well,
that was a long-winded way of asking a question.
Yeah, no, look, I don't have all the data. I didn't sit down and draw it all out. And I didn't read this Chris dude, what's his name?
Chris Walker.
Chris Walker. So, I always feel uncomfortable arguing a point when someone else has data. So everybody listening, take this from as anecdotal. It's my experience. Everybody in the organization creates content. You create boundaries around that content, right? Like if they're representing the company,
sure,
right? But everybody creates content, and you take all this money that you would have invested in SDRs and SDR, what do you call those things? Benefits and all the benefits, like so the 1.3 or 1.38, whatever.
Yeah.
And you dump all of that into becoming a content creation organization. And it's not just webinars and it's not just ebooks, right? It's everything. It's videos without a call to action.
Yep.
It's massive learning experiences. Get your CEO out there and get him or her talking about the things that are important. Get him and her addressing the challenges in the marketplace. Get him or her a personality.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Where they're out there not just talking like a talking head, but they're literally like talking to the average Joe and about what they see at both a macro level or a micro level, right? So I just think it's all about exposure and awareness. I did write a book before Gap Selling that was actually I like better, but not many people know about it, called Not Taught. And it's basically what I say, what it takes to be successful in the 21st century. And I break down how the 21st century has changed from the 20th century as we moved from the what I call the Industrial Revolution to the information era, right? And how that has changed everything from how we get a job to how we show up at work, how we leverage thinking, how we leverage our expertise versus our experience, how we go to college. Like I said, it changed everything.
Yep.
And one of the things I said is obscurity will be the plague of the commoner.
Yes.
Right? Obscurity will be the plague of the commoner. So the more that people know you, the more inbound you're going to get. Right? So write a book, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, or have someone write it for you and get that shit out, right? Yeah. Have a weekly or bi-weekly podcast. Send out a message. I don't give a shit, but everybody needs to be creating content like crazy. And yes, the content needs to be good and it's important, but more so, just create a lot of it.
Yep.
Because once people know who you are, the rest becomes a lot easier, right? Like it's the equivalent of the cheesy jingles, right? There are companies who have basically built themselves on a cheesy ass jingle that no one forgot. Roto-Rooter, Tighten Up, auto insurance, right? Or the General, right? Like you do something that's memorable from a jingle perspective. I don't say try that because that's always a crapshoot.
Totally.
But you stay in people's faces and you create a brand where they always know who you are. You win. You know what another example of this is phenomenal is Red Bull. With the exception of those cheesy commercials once in a while, Red Bull's known because of Red Bull's videos, Red Bull's
Their 4K
TV.
Extreme.
Yeah. So that's all advertising. Red Bull is no longer a fucking energy drink. Red Bull as a company is a massive marketing network.
Yes.
That's what they are.
I love it.
Right? So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I'm here.
Well, what's interesting, it is why you're here. What's interesting too is we talk about fundamentals that scale consistently over time. Like there's 4 different pillars to that. Fundamentals being, what are your fundamentals, right? What are the pillars of the fundamentals? I talk about list, message, rep, follow-up. But those fundamentals might be different for brand, equity building, demand gen, et cetera. But then you've got at scale. So fundamentals at scale. So how do we systematically do that more and better and more
Yep,
efficiently. Consistently, we far too often quit on things.
Yep.
Over time, we have such a small time horizon for things to be successful that we give up on them before. It's the whole. It's
that's
the
a big
analogy of
problem.
the gold digger who's got the pick and he's hitting, and he finally he's like 3 inches away from
like,
gold.
fuck it, I give up.
He's like, fuck, I quit.
And you can see it. It's all right there.
It's right there. And so I think that we have to apply that to everything. And what's interesting and something that I think would be unique for you to try is leveraging demand gen or leveraging outbound. All like every channel is advertising, right? We call it conversational advertising on the phone, right? It's all it is I'm trying to get a message in front of the buyers that I want to get in front of. Now that messaging is key. The call to action is key. Have a compelling ask to the point of commercial insights with challenger customer. But taking your content, taking your brand, et cetera, applying outbound to it, it just creates a new distribution channel for you to get your message. So something we're testing with right now is I think the market's so broken and so fixated on this North Star metric of a meeting, booking a meeting, right? We just have SDRs and they're comped on, they're fired on, they're promoted based on how many meetings you set. Well, as you and I know, there's only 3% of the market that's buying. So like, what are we going to do with the Chet Holmes buyer pyramid of the 7% that's open to it, the 30% not thinking about it, 30% that's not sure or don't think they want it, and then obviously there's a 30% that will never buy. What do we do about that? Well, what we found is if you can take something like a webinar or a piece of content or a guide or a training of some sort, and you can use the phone or email as a distribution channel for that, and you can sit back and say, it's not about the meeting here, I'm playing the long brand equity game here, your conversions shoot to the roof. And so what we found is we have a 2.5x opt-in lead capture on outbound just by introducing a compelling ask. And so I think more companies need to play the long game.
Give me an example of a compelling ask.
So I just talked about outbound profitability. We ran a campaign, called in January, knowing the message, knowing the market, knowing where people are at. And said, hey, are you guys thinking about outbound? Yeah, it's a struggle. Well, we do outbound day-to-day basis. This is what we do. Companies we do it for, big names, small names, et cetera. Our CEO is going to run a webinar next week on Wednesday on how to build a profitable outbound engine in 2024. I'll opt you in if you're interested. If not, no worries. I can just send you the recording, whatever. A compelling ask there is to say, hey, I'm here to provide value.
Yeah.
If a conversion happens afterwards, great, right? But when you do that, you're building brand equity with them. Whether they show up to the webinar or not, you've now got their leads. You can follow up on that. You can send them the recording. They didn't show up, whatever. That's an approach that's winning, right? And I think that applying brand to outbound, to demand gen, and so on, I think it's a huge opportunity. It's another channel of people can be reached to the point of phone-ready leads. Like we have the ability to talk to 30%. So we talk to someone every 3 times to pick up the phone. So we've solved the list aspect, know who we target. We've solved the connect aspect, deliverability. Now it comes down to can the rep deliver the message?
Yeah.
And the message has to have a compelling ask. So as you think about the horizon of sales or the sales landscape, they can invest in brand and so on. What are you seeing specifically for sales? Because obviously you're all about conversions and close rates, and gap selling is to optimize for closes and conversions. Should sales reps be building their own pipe? Should they be investing in their own brand? Is it not binary and do it all? Like, what are you seeing with sales reps?
Look, the first thing is if you've solved the connection problem. If you can solve everybody's connections problem, you've got a nice big fat business, and if you get them to believe it. So much so that I will have my team call you, and I want to see how. I know Ryan came out with this. I think my team talked to him once, but he didn't convince him. So if you can convince him, we're open to that. But secondly, the connection problem has to be solved. Until that's solved, until I'm convinced it's solved, at least for me at a micro level, we're tripling and quadrupling down on being content creators. And now I like this compelling ask. We have tons of those. I just don't use an AE or SDR.
Sure.
We have 30, 40,000 people on an email list. I think it's almost 80,000 people on LinkedIn. So
distribution's easy. There.
Yeah. So we invite people to these things. So we do what you're describing, and it does slightly differently. Again, I'm not saying it won't work for us. I'm just saying I appreciate the piece, but how we get out there is slightly different. And if we can do it with an AE, I'm down. But until then, yes, I think I want full service AEs, and as what we do here is as the leads come in, we distribute them to the AEs, and it's that AE's person to get on it right away. They have to then deliver the message properly. For us, from a gap selling perspective, it's similar in that idea that it's I think you call it a compelling message or
ask.
Compelling ask. Ours is slightly that way. We go to it's do they have a business problem we can solve? So our team leads with the business problems we know that we solve, and we try to engage them in a conversation. So that, are you experiencing any of these types of problems? It can be root causes or business problems. We know how to tie them together. So our whole hope is to get the buyer to start talking about the challenges they have to an extent that, watch this, that it's worth 15 minutes to talk more about it and if we can solve it, right? Yep. So all we want to do is get that buyer to acknowledge that this may be a problem for them in a way that blowing us off makes them feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
Right? So let's just say I just started working with a trainer because...
It's the law of reciprocity.
Actually, no. In this case, like the example is I just started working with a trainer. For all intent purposes, I had no insecurity about my weight. I'm on the thin side, but I'm 56, right? So, and I was telling you, I still have the same washboard I had when I was, in high school. So in the big picture, I'm doing okay, right? So I don't feel like I have a problem, but I had just had shoulder surgery, and had I not been more aware and maybe a little more insecure, and you called me up, I wouldn't have said I need a trainer. But if you were smart enough to say, hey, have you recently lost any weight? Are you finding that as you get older, your definition isn't where it used to be? I'm like, yeah. Right? So you've got me thinking, okay, there are a couple of things I'm not thrilled about, and all you're asking is 15 minutes to learn a little more on how you might be able to solve that. You got me. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The consideration is I will give you a little bit of my time if you'll give me some information on something I'm not 100% happy with. That's what gap selling is like on the front end. Can we scratch you just enough for you to say, all right, yeah, you know what? I don't think I need any help, but good point. A couple of things bugging me. All right, fine. I'll play along. I'll give you 15 minutes, 20 minutes to see. So that's how we do it with that. And that's what I expect of the rep. So we do that from emails and LinkedIn, et cetera. Sure. But outside that, most of our stuff comes in, people calling in. We have tracks that they can choose to come in.
Cool.
And as they come in, and we call them hand raisers, it's our team's job to take that hand raiser, find the problem, and move them all the way through the sales cycle. And we have just under a 40% close rate doing that.
Sick.
Right? So now I think that all because of the brand we've created. When we have right now we have 4 certified trainers in the program. We're recruiting for more. They're building their brands, and as they put out their information and they build their brands, it's building on top of the gap selling and the ASG brand. It's just a cycle like this, right? A couple of them have their own podcasts, so we're going to go 4 to 8 to 16. Just imagine all these people out there talking, all these people pushing the concept that we're here to change the way the world sells, right? So we create this box of what it means to be a gap seller, a culture, right? What we're trying to do, what our mission is, and it's so clear that everything we put out makes it really understandable who we are, what you get, and why you'd want to come talk to us.
Well, and a lot of it, you have to know the customer. I think, again, to the commoditization of data, we find ourselves in this place of you don't even know who you sell to. Mm-hmm. And who you sell to is not demographic, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's part of it, sure. But like there's firmographics, there's psychographics, there's exographics, whatever you want to call it. There's different lenses that companies are looking through at any given time. That's why we talk about like the 5th potential pillar, timing, right? You have to identify not just an overarching customer, unless you sell one specific product that solves one specific pain point for one specific group of people. You're going to have different buyers, even within accounts. We talk a lot about a lot of people. You choose accounts, you sell to accounts. No, you choose accounts, you sell to people, because there's key buyers, there's buying committee, there's frontline members, et cetera. They're all involved in the decision in some way, shape, or form, and people don't do the hard work of identifying who do we sell to. And I think that sales would be solved if you did nothing else, connect rates and all that aside. If you just knew who you sold to, there is a downstream revenue impact waiting for you.
So how do you define who you sell to? What's the number one criteria?
Well, we mean in terms of
who you decide who to sell to.
Well, one, you look at who you've sold to.
Okay, and what are you looking for in who you sold to?
Well, we have a practice on ourselves. So we take a list of everyone we've ever sold to. We have a rating scale of 1 to 5. 1 being would never take on that client again for whatever reason, either poor performance on our end or terrible client. 5 being perfect client, duplicate them. We've got a crazy.
But what makes them a perfect client?
Subjective.
Not so much.
You don't think so?
No. So
I think it is.
When you say that perfect client, describe the perfect client for you.
We have 3 sectors, so it's hard. That's why I'm saying
Pick
there's
one.
different
I don't
messages.
care. Just pick one.
So let's say mid-market, unsexy B2B.
Okay. Why is that mid-market, unsexy B2B? Why is that a perfect client?
1, budget. They have it. 2, from a size perspective, they got a big enough sales team that when we come in, we pull one lever at massive uptick. 3, they're not bought into this sales acceleration industrial complex that we live within right now from a technology perspective. I think venture capital has been a cancer to sales.
Okay.
Not the business, but the sales, because we stopped caring about profitability.
Yep.
But they don't buy into the big tech stacks necessarily. They don't buy into massive amounts of training and consultants and all these different things. And so the noise is quieter.
Okay. So I kind of like that last piece, but where I'm going to challenge you a little is, and the reason I say I like the last piece is I think it kind of falls into where I was going with this. I completely agree with you. Too many people don't know who they sell to, but I flip it on its head. They don't know who they sell to because they don't know who or what environment is most prone to the problems they solve. That's what more people need to do. So people listen to, I'm looking at that, right? Listen to me loud and clear. Listen to me loud and clear. When you build that list of who you sell to, you should be starting with, who do I think is most probable to be struggling with
100%.
the problems I solve? So the first thing you have to do is, what problems do I solve?
Most
Most people have no idea what problems they solve. They literally try this sometimes. Go to someone and say, hey, you do X, Y business. What problems do you solve? And what they say is, we help companies do. That's not a problem. That's the solution.
Yes.
Right? What problem do you solve? What are they struggling with? Right?
So if you're a brand, if you do brand marketing for someone, it's we remove you from obscurity.
Okay, so even you just did it right there. We remove you from obscurity.
That's the solution.
That's the solution. See, you did it right. I even told you the answer.
The problem is you are obscure.
Yeah, I can live with that. The problem is, in putting in their terms, is you don't have the market awareness that you need. Now, I would like to take a step further, and this is gap selling. The problem is you lack market awareness. The impact is you lack market awareness, and therefore you're having a hard time competing with the bigger players, and your growth is not meeting your goals.
It's good.
Now, think about that. That's good because you're already thinking, fuck, they could need that brand marketer's help. You see what I'm doing?
Yep.
So then you have to ask yourself, okay, if that's the problem I solve, what type of environment or what type of companies or what type of situation would people most likely be in that? Now, I don't know. I'm not a brand marketer, but I'm going to go out and guess and say companies that happen to be less than 12 years old and older than 6 years old that are around 60 million. I'm making shit up, right?
Totally.
But in my logic
we have
is,
that criteria too.
Yeah, right. My logic is you have enough money that you're not just a startup, so you've been in the market for a while, so you're making money, but you haven't been able to penetrate and get mass adoption of who you are. So you're kind of stuck in this, people don't know who we are, but we're doing okay type of thing. That environment, right, is ripe. You see where I'm going with this?
Yes.
Is ripe for these brand services because could potentially have a brand problem.
Yes.
So that's what people miss. And that's what gap selling is literally about, is getting real clear on the problems you solve so that you can begin to go find those problems and get buyers to use them. And another example I like is, if I'm a therapist and who's my target market? Well, let's just say I'm a marriage therapist. And I had to cold call and I had a list. None of this is public, but you get my point. I'm going to target people who have been married for 7 to 9 years. I'm going to target people who are 30 and been married for 7 to 9 years, right? Because I know that if you got married at 21 and you've been married 7 or 8 years, which almost all couples struggle with, and by the way, you're only 30, you got married real young, you didn't have communication skills, no one taught you how to do it, there's probably a chance you got married because you had a kid, 30 years old, you're still feeling young and feeling trapped. You see what I'm doing? 100%. Like, I know the environment is conducive to a fucked up marriage.
Yes.
So that's my target market.
Yeah, for us, it's couple different indicators. So one would be they are of a certain size. Let's say it's $50 million janitorial services company selling big contracts to manufacture.
Yeah.
New sales leader, which means they're trying to make sales changes, decreasing headcount in sales. Which means indicator would be new person's coming in. They have a desire to grow. They would have been hired if the company didn't have a desire to grow. They're within a budget range that we know they can afford our $250,000, $500,000 fee. And they have a decrease in sales headcount, which means firings or terminations and or quittings happening. So therefore, you don't have the resources currently to get to your growth goals.
So they have the problem you can fix. So you know that if you call 100 of those, 20 are probably a perfect fit.
100%.
There you go. So that's problem led. So that's what we call problem centric selling or problem led prospecting, and that's what gap selling is all about. But most people don't know that.
So when it comes to agitating on that problem, would you talk about it? What do you call it when you agitate the problem a little bit? You had a phrase. I couldn't remember.
Shit comes out of my mouth and I forget.
That's okay.
I said.
Well, we call it drag them to the glass. Right. So how long do you stay on the problem? How much do you agitate the problem? Because there's different schools of thought, right? Sell the dream, or sell the problem, right? When do you make that transition to solution from the problem? How much agitation needs to happen within an account?
Fantastic question, and I guess you could call this agitation. I don't call it agitation. The way we do it is once it's defined. So again, another area, the hardest part about gap selling, and we see this every time, but it gets less and less as it becomes more, not well known, but more, what's something out a long time? More acceptable, whatever the term is. Everybody wants to, in the initial put gap selling, who have never read it, just heard of it, or only know it this deep, want to put it with all the other sales trainings.
Yeah.
But when you start digging in, they're like, oh shit, damn, this is completely different. And one of the ways we make it completely different is this idea of defining everything. I talk about it in the book. You must define everything you learn from that buyer. So to answer your question, as most people try to agitate and find out what's wrong, we say define it. So once we start defining it, how big is the problem, or how often, using the marriage therapy, how often do you fight? How infrequently do you have sex? How often do you sleep in a different room? How often do you call each other names? And as you get those actual numbers, you get a clear, very detailed understanding of the picture.
Yes.
But what do you think the buyer does? They see it too. Like right now, I can do this with almost anybody. It's a lot of fun. I'm not going to, but on any topic, I ask you opinion on something, you'll give it. But then if you allow me to ask you about 10 or 15 questions, 90% of the time, you're going to see it differently by the time I'm done. Because our brains don't sit in the detail 24/7. We act to how we feel in the big picture, but a lot of times we're not exactly sure. So gap selling teaches you to do that. But once you do that, then we switch to, all right, understanding this, where do you want to be?
Yes.
Then we switch to the want to be, and we define that as well. So in business, it's like, okay, we want to be, okay, I got to stick on the same thing. It's like, where do you want to be? I don't want to be fighting anymore. I don't ever want to sleep on the couch. I understand that we have to fight, but I want us to learn how to fight in a respectful way that will resolve it. I want to get back to the place where we're intimate a couple times a week. I want to travel together. I want to feel. So now they're talking about where they want to go. And again, they're defining it. You see how I did that? I don't want to sleep on the couch anymore. Right? I want to travel. That's definable once or twice a year. Right? So once it's definable, see what I've done there? What's that? There's my gap.
Yep.
So to your point, we don't sell on the future vision and the pleasure, and we don't sell on the pain. We sell on the tension between the two. And that's the gap. The bigger that gap, the greater value. And so all someone has to ask themselves is that big gap big enough for the investment required?
Love it.
Right? And so that's what we play on. We actually play on both the pleasure and the pain and the tension between the two. Right? And that's what gap selling is about. So the answer to your question is, once I've defined it and I can see in the customer's eyes that they're like, okay, I have to change.
Yes.
That's our first goal. All right, yes, I can't say I have to change. Once they agree to change, great. What do you want to change to? They describe it. Now I have a gap. It's 80% done.
What's interesting, back to the personal life identity declarations that we talked about, is there's this thing that I think it's Garrett White. He talks a lot about the pit. Like, you've got to go to the pit, the dark place.
Yep.
Right? Because in order to create, again, this is why I don't love affirmations versus declarations, is declarations are based off of the dark place.
Yep.
Right? And so, go with marriage. I don't want to fight anymore.
Yep.
Well, what is the dark place? What brings you to the dark place that you currently believe? What is your current reality? My wife's a bitch, or whatever your things might be. You have to put that on paper, not physically, but you have to be self-aware enough and aware of the circumstance. Go to the pit where it might be dark, and then from there comes the declaration of where you want to be.
Yes.
So it's literally gap selling. But
there you go, baby. There you go.
I love that. That's super good.
It's the psychology of change. Like we say all the time, the difference between gap selling and all the other methods, even though some did bump into where gap selling went further, bumped into it, Spin did a good job, but they didn't go all the way. And all of those almost every single sales method and process today is designed to manage the transaction, right? I got to manage the transaction. Gap selling is designed on managing the change.
This is why I don't like Medic.
Yeah, Medic's a perfect example. It's all managing the transaction.
100%.
Gap selling is all about managing the change. What change are they trying to make? Why are they trying to make it? What happens if they don't make it? What happens if they do make it? What's it going to take to make it? What are the risks? It's all change management, not transaction management, which is a hard step for a lot of people to take.
Well, even like I used to subscribe to BANT because I think BANT, there is a transaction management with budget, authority, and timing.
Yep.
Need touches this a little bit, but no one stays there. Right? They don't spend enough time on need, which is that pain and pleasure aspect you're talking about. I think that's where, and maybe it's not an issue with BANT as much as it's an issue with understanding what should go into BANT. So let me ask this. Let's be controversial.
Yeah.
What? Maybe Medic's the answer. I don't know. What is it that you see sales organizations subscribing to today? If you want to call out specific movements, I'd love you to because that'd be great for content. What is a specific movement or philosophy sales teams are subscribing to prior to you getting there that you think is detrimental?
All of them.
Okay.
All of them. Particularly the Medic's getting a big play. BANT, people are starting to leave BANT. But even to your point, I'll touch on the BANT piece real quick. Look, okay, if you're really creative, you can leverage the need piece and saying, okay, we need to spend more time there. But what I found is sort of like you did just a second ago. I love that you did it. Remember I said to you, I asked what problem they solve, and we help companies.
Yeah,
I said,
we remove you from obscurity.
Yeah, and you literally did the exact same thing I told you is a mess up. But every time I'm with a customer, they do the same thing. So in the concept of need, in BANT, 90% of the time, when someone says they need something, or you're trying to find out what they need, you're letting the customer drive that need. Right? I need a glass of water. I need a microphone. And you start asking why and what are you looking for in a microphone?
They instantly go to solution.
Yeah. Gap selling is like, no. We literally say, don't sell to need in gap selling. I go so far as to say, I don't trust you as a customer. I'm the expert in sales training. I'm the expert in sales consulting. I don't trust that you're making the right decision, telling me what you need. I don't know that you need sales training. I don't know what kind of sales training you need. Let's talk. And so I take it from here and I move into the problem state. And I do, fucking you're right. You do need it. Here's my few suggestions. So no, bro, you could get away with consulting and spend no money on training. You see what I'm saying? So BANT doesn't set you up for that. Neither does Medic. Medic says metrics, but there's very little definition of what metrics, why those metrics matter, how that affects the customer. And then they say problem, but again, same concept. It says nothing about what problems are you trying to find, why those problems matter. It's too broad.
Yes.
And so what everybody defaults to simple bullshit. Simple bullshit that doesn't define the whole change process.
So what is a process for someone outside of reading Gap and hiring you guys? Let's just say they read Gap, they get it. How do they start making that transition?
So look, if you don't want, if the easiest way to do it, and you can actually download this off our website, is build a problem identification chart. Okay. So pretend Gap doesn't exist. Go with problem-centric, although we trademarked that. That goes to prove you that gap selling is different. We trademarked problem-centric. Why? Because when I wrote the book, I ran a search, and I think there was one return for problem-centric. Now you do it? Infinite. Yep. So I don't care if anybody gives me credit or not. I fucking know better.
I got the trademark, bitch.
Yeah, I know better, right? I know the impact gap selling has had on sales training in the last 3 or 4 years, whether anybody wants to give me credit or not. I can see it plain as day. And so can my team. They're like, I won't use names, but look at them. You see what they just did right there? I'm like, I know. But so what I tell people is pretend Gap doesn't just do the problem identification chart. So sit down with your team and ask yourself, what business problems do we solve? Okay? And here's the hint. You don't solve more than 3 or 4 business problems. Facts. Okay? A business problem is a business outcome of a root cause, and I'll get to that in a second. So what are the 3 or 4 business problems you solve? Okay. Then from there, ask yourself, if those business problems are inside an organization, what is the impact that those business problems have on the business? Now, those can be infinite. So just list as many as you can and try to do the 80-20 rule, like the most common ones, okay? Because they technically speaking could be infinite. You just never know.
Yep.
Then the next column is impacts, right? Or what we call, I'm sorry. The next column is root cause, or what we call technical problems. The root causes are everybody listen loud and clear. A technical problem or root cause is a problem with a process or a tool.
Okay.
So the business problem, for easy math, is not making revenue. But don't use that one because everybody can use that one. So you got to get a step lower. But the business problem is the outshoot of the root causes.
Give me an example.
Business problem. I'm just looking at a camera. None of my pictures are being chosen for the newspaper, or I'm not getting any of my pictures picked up by when you submit them in what's the word I'm looking for? You submit as independent. You submit pictures and they grab them and use them for whatever. So none of my pictures are being chosen. That's the business problem. The root cause could be that the lens I use doesn't shoot at a high enough pixel, and so they feel when they blow them up, they're not as sharp as others. It could be that I am not good with light and I'm missing the light assessment. It could be I'm terrible at framing a picture. I'm terrible at editing. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
All of those things are root causes.
And those can be infinite.
Infinite, yes.
Got
But
it.
of course, like anything else, there's an 80% rule, right? But of those, because of those root causes, I'm not doing well in my business because I'm not getting a very good conversion rate on pictures submitted.
Got it.
So if I'm going to sell to you and I get you to admit that my conversion rate for pictures submitted is low, and then I start digging into why it's low, and I say, well, talk to me about how you do your lighting. Can you show me what lenses you're using? Can you talk to me about whatever? And I start to figure out what that is. I'm like, well, hey, I can help you with that.
Yeah.
So now what I've done, you're like, oh shit, that guy's a genius. I told him my business problem is, he helped me diagnose what the root causes are. The impact of this is I'm not making enough money, or I'm not winning a Pulitzer. I don't give a fuck, like whatever you wanted, right? Yep. So now I've got a whole picture painted, but the only thing you can solve as a business is the root causes. Right? You can't solve my problem without going down the root cause journey.
That's right.
And no selling methodology has ever broken it down like that. But when you get a customer to spill all those beans and lay it out, you're in prime position to walk through a solution, because you say, you told me that you struggle with lighting and editing. You told me you're using this editing tool, and what we know about this editing tool is da-da-da-da, and that's why you're struggling, and we're going to recommend this, and you're eating out of my hand.
Boom. Love it.
So do one of those for your company. It was the long story. Build a pick, answer all those questions, and that's going to change everything.
And that was called Problem Identification System.
Chart. Pick. P-I-C.
Chart. Got it. Okay,
Problem identification chart.
All right, let's get on the path of actually running the business. So let's start high level. What is required of a good CEO?
Wow.
Don't do what Cloudflare did.
Yeah, don't do what Cloudflare did. I would start with vision. And I would start with an external vision of the market or the space you're trying to play. And then I would back that up with an equal vision around the culture and identity of the company. Those are the two critical
How does
pieces.
one shape the culture identity?
The same way you would shape yourself, as we talked earlier today, or the same way you shape your family. So basically you ask, what are the values that I have as a CEO, as a person, and how am I going to instill those values into a business, and how do those values play out in a business setting versus a personal setting? But it's about values again. Like, what do we value as a corporation and corporate responsibility, and as a entity of 5, 10s, 1s, 10s, 50s, 100s, thousands of people?
Yep. Does sales growth have defined values? Like, do you guys actually go over them as a company?
Absolutely.
What are they?
So the biggest value we have is the person and freedom and flexibility.
Okay.
So we believe that, and this was hard for me at first because, I like to think I'm the smartest guy in the room, right? So I believe that the only way to scale is to capitalize on human capital.
Okay.
So I don't know if you know, I'm going to take a quite deviation, so if I lose it, bring me back.
Okay.
I'm old enough to remember 2000. I was 32 in 2000, right? And they came out with a list of the top innovations in the last 100 years or 1,000 years, whatever it was. Do you know what the top innovation was?
2000? The internet?
Nope.
Television?
Nope.
Toaster oven?
Nope. Yeah, there you go. It'll blow your mind. And I loved it. I sat there for a second. I wanted to hug the group that came up with it. Education of the masses.
Okay.
The number one advancement of the last 100 or 1,000 years, whatever the number was, right? And stop and think about that for a second. If we had started educating the masses in 1200, where would we be today? We'd be way past where we are. Are you kidding me? We would be way past where we are. Why do you think so?
Well, it compounds on itself. And so.
But what compounds on itself?
Education breeding more education.
Okay, yes, but not exactly. Yes, that's peak. But it did education compounded on itself because we were educating people, so it wasn't a compound effect. What did we lose out on when we weren't educating the masses?
Stumped.
Maximizing human capital, maximizing human resources. How many Einsteins toiled away in a field?
By themselves.
By themselves, right? So when you're not educating the masses, you're not
human potential.
Yes,
helping people realize their potential.
Yes, we are not as a society. We were not maximizing human potential, right? So when you're not maximizing human potential, you are limited by the brain power you're capitalizing on. So this is a long answer to, I recognize that and said, I'm creating the freedom box. And basically that means I don't want to be the only making decisions. I want everybody's unique power driving this company forward.
And that's the freedom and flexibility?
Yes, so what we have is a freedom box. And the freedom box is, here's your job. Here is what you're supposed to, the outcomes. Do whatever the fuck you want. Just, you can't go outside of the box. When you first start, that's things like, if you're in sales, don't worry about marketing. Do your job.
Yep.
And you can't turn around and spend, and we're small enough to come in, don't pay enough attention, but you can't spend 10 grand without talking to somebody. You know what I'm saying? You can't make promises that we can't deliver on. But outside of that, if you think selling and putting a sandwich board on your back and walking up and down the street is going to work, fucking have at it. But if it doesn't make it, then you better stop, pivot, and do something else.
Now I'm going to ask the question other people are going to want to ask. Does that scale?
100%. You just have to manage it. 100%. It's a culture. It scales because the culture builds on it.
Okay.
You know who did it is, and we didn't know this, and then Brady listened to the auto. Yeah, Brady listened to the audiobook. She goes, you got to listen to this. You got to listen to this. They're doing what we're doing. And I'm like, well, I guess we're doing what they're doing. They were there first.
Yep.
But yeah, it's similar to the Netflix model, which we had no idea about. But we call it the freedom box.
Yeah, I'm super intrigued by it because I know the unlimited vacation policy and all that backfired to some degree. Just people took less.
Yeah. So,
but part of that book actually I think was helpful, and I think people miss this part because we have that here, which is it has to come from the top down. And so if this is why I asked about the CEO and leadership. If you have an unlimited vacation policy, but the leader takes 2 days of vacation, people underneath them are not going to feel comfortable taking 4 weeks, right? So you have to, what he talks about is you have to applaud and celebrate when people go on, ask them about their trip. Awesome, man. Glad you got that. Hope you're recharged, whatever. But I think we don't celebrate the freedom.
No, we have, but freedom to us isn't freedom to go on. We have unlimited vacation. And we have a thing on Slack called Fun Times, and people posted pictures of vacation and, and the shit they do. But freedom to us isn't necessarily the freedom not to work. It's the freedom is you do your job.
Work as you want.
Work as you want, not when you want to, but as you want. If you feel that never making a cold call is going to work for you, and you pick other paths, pick other paths. So you know what the hardest part about that is? We did not see this coming. The hardest part of the freedom box and the hardest part of letting people do their own thing to be successful at the job is the accountability piece. People have freaked the fuck out because when I don't tell you to do your job, you can't hide behind me. We didn't see that coming. Sometimes when people come on, they're like, well, what do I do now? I'm like, you decide, it's your job. Well, but what if, they're freaked by the ownership and accountability that comes with choosing how you do your job. People are conditioned to be told how to do it. And to your part, way earlier today, if I tell you how to do your job and I have all the steps and it doesn't work, whose fault is it?
Yours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And as a leader, I was like, I want no part of that. When I used to be an employee, I hated that. I'd have all of these ideas and I say, what do you do? We don't do that. And so I do it their way. I'll never forget this. I had a boss. We were down a rep. I had to hire a new rep. I didn't see anybody I liked. And he's like, you need a new rep. And I'm like, I don't see anybody. And he gave me this long fucking story about not working outside of the box. I remember I was so mad. And so finally I was like, fuck it. I'll pick the best one that I saw so far, but I didn't like him. Didn't think he'd work. He didn't even last 3 weeks. I'll never forget that. And guess who he blamed?
You.
Me. I was so mad. I was like, how dare you? I didn't want to hire him. I knew what I was doing in my business. I was willing to wait. I was willing to take the risk. You called me in. You called me out. So fuck it. I did it your way. And now you're blaming me? So I knew when I ran a company, I would never do that to somebody. You make your choices. I'm giving you the freedom. I'm giving you all the resources. But if it doesn't work out, don't look at me. Look at you. And that scared people more than we realized. So now we have to help hold their hands a little.
So as what do you measure? Like when you look at your business health and your business success and your employee health, your department health, what is it that you're measuring?
We could get better at that, but we're measuring the
Most small businesses can.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, I mean, look, we're measuring profitability, which we're highly profitable because we're a service industry, and so we're highly profitable from that perspective. And then basically top line revenue and profitability. We're too small to actually measure turnover because we don't have any. So it's not worth it. I mean, one person leaves, that'd be
10%
or something. Yeah, it's like, okay, and they leave when? So, on the general manager side, we measure how many people we add to the certification, program. We measure how many people, get at the conversion rate of those who are interested who actually certify. It is not easy to certify to be a gap seller. We do not have a 100% certification rate. Like we take gap selling very seriously. So, people attrit. I think that's the right word, right? They attrit. So, those are primarily it.
Yeah, that's something I've been really honing in on our company is just what are our downstream metrics, especially as we get bigger. I told you we have 100, 105-ish people. Like as we get bigger, I have to have visibility into every department and look at, to your point, like there's outcomes required for particular roles. And so what are the contributing factors to that? Now, I don't give as much freedom as you probably do. I'm also not as profitable probably as you are. We're in growth mode, so I'm spending a lot. But that's something that we really tried to hone in on is what are the 3 to 5 North Star metrics per role, and how does that trickle up to the top? And so that's something that we're really working on this year. How long have you been rolling out the certification program? How long has that been live?
Just under 2 years.
Okay.
Learned a lot on that one. I'm still super bullish on it, but that has been a learning. That's an example of failure.
Licensing's tough.
Learning to fail and fixing it. And so,
what'd you learn there?
Where do I start? So one we learned is everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but nobody wants to put in the work.
Everyone wants to be strong, but no one wants to lift heavy ass weights.
Yeah. That's been the biggest one is everybody wanted to be a gap selling certified trainer. And then when they got into it or realized, I have to pay you money to be trained. Like a lot of people come to us and literally think that they're just going to show up and not pay a dime for us to spend. Training takes 90 to 120 and sometimes 180 days to get them certified. Because it's hard. I mean, our Rachel, our GM and head trainer, she works her ass off trying to get these people up to speed. Because again, I'd love for anybody who wants to sit and watch. Gap selling is not your typical training. And it is not a surface level methodology. It is deep, and there are nuances and there are elements that are not innate to people. And so we watch people struggle as like, oh my God, this is way harder than I thought. Like, no shit. But once we get you through that, it goes well. So that was probably the biggest one. And so therefore that messed up all our numbers, right? So we had X amount of conversion built in, but then we realized the number of people were getting in, they weren't moving. And when they did commit, they were dropping out. It was too hard. A lot of people don't give themselves enough runway. So they're in for 6 months and they're not making $10 million. And they're like, I can't do this anymore. I'm like, well, how long did you think this was going to take?
Fundamentals at scale consistently over time.
Yeah. So we just learned a lot about human nature. And then we also learned about how we were training them, the process, the support, blah, blah, blah. So we just learned a ton.
So you're at 4 certified right now. How do you get to 80? And when do you get to 80?
Well, the plan was to get to 80 by, what are we now? By 2028.
Okay.
So we're behind on that, but I'm still bullish that as anything, as it works, as we figure it out, there's going to be the friction will be reduced.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and like you said, it compounds on itself.
Yeah. One of the things we didn't see coming, which is kind of cool, the way we originally built it, we had our certified trainers and we had our internal salespeople. Well, we had a few changes, and all of a sudden, like, wait, I'm not going to hire another inbound person. These people over here who are certified are working their ass off, and some of them aren't quite getting the traction they want. So you know what? Let's take the leads we generate and throw them over here. So now one of our trainers, she was so busy with the work we threw her, she was unable to generate her own. So we had to hurry up and get more people on. So the end vision is ASG as a standalone company is basically Red Bull. We are a massive marketing company, right, that drives leads for those 80 in addition to what they drive themselves. And the incentive is you make a lot less money. You can make a good living, but you make a lot less money closing ours than you do closing your own.
Yeah. Are you familiar with StoryBrand?
Yeah.
So they did that. And then EOS.
Yep.
Gino Wickman Traction.
Yep.
They both done a great job with the marketing side of things. But then it got out of hand with the whole, like, the bigger you get, I'm trying to think of the
Diluted.
Yeah, you get diluted, so you can't keep up with the amount of leads you have. That's why having an extremely hardcore certification program. StoryBrand was a bullshit, certification program. It's like go to a seminar for 2 days and here's your certification.
No, we're protecting this brand like nobody's business. Doug, like literally, you get certified to be able to deliver a gap selling training. You are legit because I will not
hurts your brand.
Dilute this brand. Yeah.
Well, let's take a pivot. You and I had some back and forth on some topics that we kind of conjured up together, some things that we could hit. I want to kind of do rapid fire so that we could run through a lot of these. And I've cherry picked a few of these. I think it would be good to start. We can go wherever it takes us. But a couple things here. The first one that's really interesting, you wrote down difference between destruction and defeated. We can be defeated, but we can't be destructive.
Yeah. Look, I've watched people, let me phrase it. People have a tendency to, when they fail, to rather than accept the defeat and move on, is to almost double down on the defeat and destroy themselves. So, the idea is, look, it's okay to be defeated. It's okay to accept the fact that I'm in a down place. It's okay to be like, I failed. I'm not feeling good about myself. This sucks. But don't turn that into destruction. Don't start taking drugs. Don't start lashing out at people. Don't quit your job, right? Like, don't be destructive. And I think those two go hand in hand far too often. Yeah. And it just gets worse, right? So these people get to some place and rather than accept and sort of lean into the defeat and then steer out of it, they double down and go from defeatism to destructionism. And I think they do that because it's like, fuck it, I'm here now.
Yep. Right?
And it's just a lash out. So I say, look, it is absolutely okay to be defeated, but don't let it get you into destruction mode. And it's a thin line between I'm defeated and now I'm destroying.
Well, it comes back even to the not good, not bad it is. It just is. I think that we far too often, and it's back to the path, right? It's the path versus the destination. We look at failure as we are no longer on track for our destination instead of saying, no, failure is part of the path to the destination. And so we fail. I love that. And I see that so often. Like I have so many entrepreneurial friends who marriages fell apart. They ended up getting into substance abuse or whatever. And a lot of it's because they have their identity wrapped up in these destinations, and failures mean they're not going to get to the destination when they want to. And so,
and I've been there. Yeah. Right? Like, look, I get it. We've all been there, and it's a horrible example, but it's a simple one. Like your marriage fails, and maybe you lost your job, and you've got $5,000 left in the bank, and you're like, fuck it, and you went and buy that new computer you always wanted. Like that's destruction. Like when the minute you say fuck it, that's when you cross the line to destruction mode, and that cycle becomes almost impossible to get out of. So just don't go. It's okay to be defeated. Just don't be destructive.
Let's talk about sacrifice. So we had here sacrifice for friends and for loyalty, also sacrifice for work. So to that point where you're trying to certify folks, they don't have enough runway, they're not making money fast enough, like risk and reward is a real push and pull. And so how do you view sacrifice?
So I think there's a difference between sacrifice and being a martyr, right? Like, or being a defeatist again, right? I'm sorry, or being destructive. Like if you're trying to start a business and it's not working, and you keep doubling down and you put yourself in bankruptcy and then you destroy your marriage, that was destructive. That was just stupid.
100%.
Sacrifice is more along the lines of giving up things that you want today or you would like today for tomorrow, right? I heard this, it just came to me and I forgot it, and it comes back to me. I heard a great saying along this line, but I just think people aren't willing to give anything up for what they want. I remember when I was really young, I don't know where this came from, but I came up with this phrase, and I haven't used this in a long time. Oh my God, what was it? Oh my God. It's something like, it's been a long time, but I used to love this. The definition of, yes. The definition of how bad you want, that's it. The definition of how bad you want something is not defined by how bad you want it, but by what you're willing to give up for it.
Yes.
Right? And so many people are like, I want it so bad, I want it so bad, I want it so bad. I used to do this with kids. It's funny, it's just my kids all the time. They're like, Dad, can I have a Starbucks? I have a Starbucks. No, you can use your own money. No, I don't want it anymore. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what you're saying is my money is worth less than your money.
Yep.
Right? So if you wanted it bad enough, you'd use your own money. But if you only want it using my money, then I guess you don't want it that bad.
Well, do you know Kevin Dorsey?
Of course.
KD? Yeah, so KD flew in actually a couple months ago. We had the same conversation around passion. If you are not willing to sacrifice, you are not truly passionate.
Yes, I like that.
So at the end of the day, we were talking more about like public opinion, right, on certain topics or things that are maybe like polarizing, et cetera. If you're not truly passionate about that polarizing topic, you are going to sacrifice by putting it public. And if you're not actually passionate, that sacrifice is not even worth it.
Yep.
And so I think that far too many people choose paths they're not passionate about. To your point, I think you talked about no one made you choose your job. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so many people act as if they were put in that job. If you're in a job, act like you chose it and love it, or go get another one. Right? If you're not passionate about it, then you're not going to sacrifice for it.
Nope.
And so elaborate on that a little bit. So no one made you choose your job. I think it's a good topic. Because this is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. I think far too many people are in this victim mentality. Mm-hmm. I hate my job. I hate my life, blah, 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 and they just stay there.
Mm-hmm. The idea is, to your point, I see too many people unhappy in their job. Mm. But then when you look closer, they're not trying to be the best at their job. They're literally checking boxes. They're trying to make sure that they don't lose the job. They're doing just enough to get along. Well, if you don't love your job, then you can't be the best at it. And if you can't be the best at it, then you are not going to get promotions. You're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to go anywhere. So nobody made me get into sales, okay? Nobody made you to become an engineer. Nobody made you become an HR executive. For whatever reason, you chose this shit. My assumption is you chose it because you loved it. If you chose it because it was the path of least resistance, then take a good long look in the mirror and ask why you're still doing it, right? So that's the whole point is you go through your career and look where you are. Nobody made you do it. So if you aren't doing the best at it and you're not passionate to adding to that career at a micro level of your work, at a macro level to the entire profession, stop complaining because you chose to get there and that makes no sense to me. Yep. Choose something else.
Ownership.
100% ownership. It's all about ownership.
Yeah, and you mentioned don't do anything unless you choose to be great at it.
Yes. Don't do anything unless you choose to be great. Why do it? That's the first path to failure. It's going along. That's right. Like, look, I think too many people, let's take this all the way back to the beginning. Too many people do not understand the concept of being deliberate. Okay? Now, look, things fall in our laps. I get that, right? But if you look at most people, they went to college because that's what everybody else did. Then they took some major that they thought they were interested in. Some were, some weren't. But I'd say 80% didn't follow up on that in their career on that, which is fine. I didn't. I was poli-sci, but I still loved it, right? And then they go out and they get a job somehow. Someone knew somebody. Something happened somehow. They got a job. And then they got that job and made money, so they bought a house, so they increased the rent, or they bought a car. Then they got another promotion, and they did something else. And then they met someone and got married because, well, I should probably get married now. And then from getting married, they bought a bigger house.
Yep.
And then one day they wake up and they're like, I don't like the job I'm in. I love my wife and kids, but I don't like where I am. But guess what? I can't get out because there's nothing deliberate about how they went. And Bez, what is marriage, man? Do we all agree that the general premise in the world is I found my soulmate. I found the love of my life, right? And that's why I'm getting married. Can we roughly agree on
100%.
that?
Yep.
Dude, do you honestly believe, go look when people are getting married, do you honestly believe we all found our soulmate between 25 and 30? Like, they just coincidentally just showed up?
Right.
No. We found the person we had loved the most at around the time we thought we should get married. Because if you follow the process and you do the numbers and it's your soulmate, and I agree there could be more than one soulmate, but that you could meet, I think in your entire lifetime you might meet 1, 2, maybe 3 people that could be your soulmate, but you're certainly not meeting them all at 25
right.
or 28 or 29, right? So if we all waited until we met that soulmate, some would meet him at fucking 18 in high school. I have a friend like that, started dating the girl junior high. They're still married today. People like me, I would have stayed married because I thought she was my soulmate, but I met her at 37. Some people would be at 40, some people at 29, right? It'd be spread out. But it's not. It's this. Why is it this? Because we woke up one day and said, society says I should be married between 28 and 33. Yep. I need kids between this period of time. So nothing deliberate about that. Reaction.
What's your relationship with money?
That's probably one of my biggest weaknesses. I don't know if this is the right term. I think I treat it like a commodity. I think so.
Okay.
So, to me, money is freedom. That's all I care about. That's the only reason I want money is freedom. Unfortunately, I want a higher level of freedom than most people.
Yep.
I don't want anybody ever telling me what to do again.
Yes.
I don't want anybody that I perceive as less intelligent or less capable of me telling me what the fuck to do. As you can tell, it's a sore subject for me. Look, to a lot of people from the outside looking in, I can get why they might not think I'm that bright, or I can get first impressions that maybe I'm not as deep as I am. But I think, and I go deep, and I'm not stupid. And so when I'm working in corporate America and I'm looking at this clown, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, whose dick did you suck to get this job? And you're no. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that creates such anxiety for me to have these knuckleheads telling me what to do and how to do it. I said never again. So money for me is freedom.
Yep.
The other thing for money, I put in this savings, but money is opportunity. So this is what I want everybody to think. The reason you want to save money and the reason you want to have money on the side, yeah, I get it for safety, but that's not really it. It should be for opportunity.
I 100% agree with that.
So you could one day wake up in midlife crisis and be like, I can't stand my boss anymore. And you have the money I want to be an artist. You have the money to go be an artist. If you're 32 and all of a sudden someone comes by and says, like, Gary Vee, and says, hey, you want to invest 25, 30 grand in Uber? You have it, right? Money is freedom, but it's also opportunity. When you don't have money and an opportunity presents itself, you can't act.
Yes.
And that can be any type of opportunity.
And I think we've bought hook, line, and sinker into this rainy day fund. Mm-hmm. Right. I agree. But how many rainy days are $300,000? Very fucking few.
Yeah.
And so to build this big nest egg just to feel safe,
yeah,
you're not as safe as you think you are. Right? There's nothing that's going to come your way that's going to cost you $300,000 tomorrow.
No.
And so I'm the same way. I put my money to work. I think every dollar needs to have a job, maybe multiple jobs. Ideally, I invest it pretty heavily, but I also try to invest it in such a way. I have an investment thesis of how I've accumulated my wealth. The way that I want my money to be used, it needs to have multiple jobs, but on top of that, it needs to be accessible in some way, shape, or form, so that when opportunity comes, I love debt. For the record, people hate debt. I think that debt's a good thing if you know how to leverage good debt, not bad debt. Credit card debt's not good debt.
Yeah.
And so I think that we've bought hook, line, and sinker into this Dave Ramsey style, build a nest egg, get rid of all debt, be afraid of debt, be afraid of the calamity and chaos that could come. You don't need as much as you think you do.
No.
Sitting aside.
No. Let's go.
No, but to your point, opportunity will present itself. And what I like to say is the better you get at money and the better you get at skill set, the better you get at brand, whatever it might be, once in a lifetime opportunities happen once a quarter.
Yeah.
And if you don't have money to jump on that, then that once in a lifetime opportunity will be once in a lifetime.
Once in a lifetime. I like that. I like that. The other part about my relationship with money is, and this is why I don't give, and I'm sure if we had a therapist here, they could dig deep into this. I don't have a whole lot of investments. You know, I got a second property in Vale Village, which is right downtown, which I was pretty excited about. But 95% of any money I keep, I dump back into my business. And I just feel most comfortable, call this control issues or whatever, but I just feel way more comfortable investing in myself than anything else. So I lost a lot of money last year. I invested in a company that didn't work. And I still get faith and I think it will, but I lost a lot of money, well into six figures. And if I had taken that and put other places, could I have done better? Yeah, probably. Sure. But had this business that I invested in done well, then the return would have been way more.
Asymmetrical.
Right? Yeah. So if I, like, even down to something like we talked about SaaStr, right? That cost $75K. I could have taken that $75K and I could have put it in, I don't know, in the stock market or something like that, and it might have returned 6, 7, 8%. But that $75K invested in SaaStr or that $75K invested in a marketing campaign or whatever, if it works, is 3, 4, 5x in a year. So I'm going to invest in myself. Now, once I get to a certain size and I have so much extra money, okay, no, I'm not going to invest $1 million in a marketing campaign every week because I have it. Then I will diversify.
Yes.
But until I get to a threshold in my head, every extra dime I have goes into my business, betting on me, betting on what I'm trying to do, and then everything else is experiences.
Yep.
Like I take my kids on trips. Like my kids.
It's an investment in family.
Yeah, everything's experiences. 6 figures a year in experiences.
Love that. So I have an investment thesis. So I'll backtrack. So if you look at anyone who has accumulated any level of wealth, there's this I think misconception about investing that is all about diversification, right? And you know, on day one, your first extra dollar diversified across different buckets, right? The problem is, if you want true wealth and true freedom, I think wealth is accumulated through being narrow, and wealth is kept through being diverse. Yes. And so, but it goes in that order. You've got to accumulate it first and then diversify out.
Hormozy did a thing with water. Did you see that? I think his name's Hormozy. Was it Alex Hormozy?
Yeah.
Yep. He did a thing.
He was on the podcast 2 years ago.
But yeah, so he did that. He took a glass of water and he spread it in little tiny things. He goes, this is not how the wealthy become wealthy and diversifying. Look, there's nothing in any of these. He said they fill the glass all the way up first. Then when it gets to the top and it's running over, then they start filling up the other glasses. That's right. So to your point.
Yeah, because my thesis, now I developed my thesis after I became fairly wealthy, was I call it bucketing system. So my whole end goal is I want my burn to be covered by things that I don't have to touch with my hands.
Yep.
Right. So, but the work of my hands created the ability to then do those things. So the buckets are bucket 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Bucket 1 is single digit returns. That's your stock market, your mutual funds, your whole life insurance. Bucket 2 is your double digit returns. That's your real estate. Bucket 3, to your point, is your triple digit returns, 100%, 200%, 900% returns. That's usually into your business or some sort of investment into a company. Bucket 4 is your 4 digit returns. There should be a 10x return or more. My favorite asset class is myself. Because if I invest in myself, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a mastermind, experiences, I apply to everything that I do.
Yeah, it overflows.
And so therefore the return on a $50,000 coach should be $500,000 or more, right? Yep. That's easy, right? Yep. If it applies to me, right? And then your 5th bucket, no money goes into, but infinite returns. So the better you do at the first 4, the more opportunity coming once, a lifetime comes once a quarter. You get opportunities that just because of who you are, you get opportunities in equity stakes in companies and so on. And therefore you put $0 in, but you get a return that is by definition infinite. Yep. And so, but people take that when I talk about it, and I have to caveat it but you need the money in the first place to do that well.
Yep. 100%.
If I take $100 and I put it in, a stock market, real estate, my business, there's not going to be an outsized return anywhere that can compound worth anything. So on money, if someone's listening and they're broke, why are they broke?
Most likely because they spent money they didn't have.
Yeah.
I mean, in most cases, that you spent money that you didn't have. And this goes back to insecurity. And look, you're talking to a kid who was out of the house at 17, living on in his friend's house to graduate high school, then living on couches, had like a 300 credit rating. So I get it, right? Yep. And even to this day, I certain times spend money on things I shouldn't spend it on. So I get it. But I think if you're broke, you got to ask yourself, how did I get here? How am I spending my money? What am I trying to get out of my money? And if you're honest with yourself, 9 out of 10 times, it's going to come down to ego. So either you're spending money you don't have to make it look like you're rich when you're not, or, watch this, you're not willing to take certain jobs that could make money because you don't like how it's going to make you look. Okay? So if you can get rid of the ego, and you can get rid of how poorly you spend, and then you can add the, I don't care what I'm going, if I'm a janitor or I'm a whatever, I'm going to be the best fucking one of those on the planet. There is your equation to get the hell out of poverty and to move on. I don't have so much ego that I need to make people think someone I'm not, so I don't have to spend money I don't have. Okay? 2, I don't care what job I have to start, press the domino to start working. I will take whatever job I can get and be the best at that goddamn job so I start getting promotions. And then finally, I didn't forget my third one is just I'll take any job, and that is the third, and then be so good at that job that they keep moving me forward. So if someone threw me in the streets tomorrow with nothing, I'm not telling you I could be a millionaire in any short order, but you give me enough time and I'm going to be able to take care of myself. Right? I mean, I'll get into a restaurant and start waiting tables tomorrow. I'll get into a bar waiting tomorrow. I'll live in the shittiest little place possible. You know what I'm saying? And I'll just build on that every fucking day. So no, it's ego and not willing to work hard.
I think the other thing you mentioned was value.
Got to understand your value. Yeah.
Well, if you don't bring value, you don't get money.
Yes, and that value is how hard you work.
All money accumulation is a value exchange.
Yes, 1,000%. If you're not getting paid what you want to get paid, nobody sees the value that you're bringing to the table, and you own that.
What's interesting, though, so earlier we talked about no one chose your job, so if you're unhappy, it's your fault. You chose that job.
Yep.
But at the same time, you mentioned take the job because you need the job, right? But then on top of that, you talked about being great. So I think a lot of people don't combine those two. Being great at something, or like you said, don't do something if you're not willing to be great at it.
Yep.
Does not mean that you are doing something that you are passionate about.
Nope.
Right? I think that we get pushed down this path too much of do what you're passionate about.
Yep.
Right? And you should if you can, but I think that some people are in a position, if we're talking to someone who is broke right now, you do have to just do something. Yep. But when you do that something, whether you love it or you don't, you have to desire to be great at it.
And here's what people are missing, okay? Notice I said I'd be a bartender or a waiter, okay? I like people, right? I like engaging with people. I like service. So, look, I was that back in the day. I loved it back in the day. Do I want to do it now? No, but if I'm broke, I know I can do that well, and it's service. So I'm doing something that I enjoy, right? And I see it as one step in the process. Right. Okay? Same thing here. If you're an artist and you're not making any money art, but you're broke, go be a janitor for the fucking museum. See what I did there? Like, go be a janitor for the museum. Go be a janitor for the local art school, right? Clean toilets better than fucking anybody. Clean up the paint room better than anybody. Maybe from that, you being an artist, you have insight into how they should store the paint or what they're doing with the canvases. Like, look to bring value because you're an artist and you're a janitor. Just attach yourself. It doesn't have to be the exact job. Attach yourself to something that you can get passionate about and do it better than anybody. And it's part of the journey.
And be willing to sacrifice. So, good example, Jamie Dimon, Chase, JP Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
CEO. There's a great story. Like him or don't, doesn't really matter. His story is super cool. So he went, he had the whole Ivy League education, et cetera. He can go out and get a job on Wall Street. He had a bunch of offers. And he ended up taking a $50,000 or $60,000 apprentice job under this other bigwig investor guy. And so he, instead of taking $200,000 salary at the time in that time when $200,000 was a lot, he took a $60,000 or $50,000 job, sacrificed to learn underneath something he was passionate about, that he wanted to be the greatest in the world, learn from it, and then obviously he's one of the wealthiest men in the world.
Yes.
It's a cool story.
100%. Yep. That's, again, being deliberate. Notice the theme here, right? Notice the theme here. You asked about what should someone do if they're broke. Be deliberate. But it's just, they let the ego get in the way. I don't want to take that job. I'm not going to do that job. Or they'll let the ego go and they won't live in a shitty apartment. They won't drive a shitty car. They won't take the bus. They won't not wear designer stuff, right? Well, okay, something's got to give, dog.
Yes. How much harder would you work if you knew you would die if you did not achieve your goal?
This is one, so you'll see a theme to a lot of things I like to talk about, and this is one of the greatest forms of self-assessment, period. I like it on a macro level, but it could also work on a micro level. Okay. If you're, let's say, a sales rep, and you've got to make quota, ask yourself, if you didn't make quota in 3 months and you died, what would you do? Okay, so right now, boom, February 1st, you've got till April 1st, or you're dead if you don't make quota. What would you do? Yeah, look, you're laughing because you're thinking about it, right?
100%.
You're like, holy shit. I wouldn't stop calling. I'd get creative as shit. I would I would do everything and anything possible, right? Now ask yourself, what have you done the last 3 months to make quota?
Yep.
And then what's the difference?
Big ass difference.
Right, so.
The gap.
Right, so yes, it's impossible to execute at that level if you're going to die tomorrow. I mean, you're going to die if you don't get it done, right?
Yep.
And by the way, you can't do anything illegal. You know what I'm saying? You can't work outside. You have to do the job. So, and you can't tell someone bye because I'm going to die. Like, you have to just do the job. But that gap is massive, and it's not fair to expect, and it's impossible to expect someone who could work at that level at scale forever. You burn out, whatever. But what I like people to ask them is, how big is that gap and how much can you shrink it? Right? How much more can you give and it be reasonable? And that's where the honest conversation has to come in. And that's where I catch myself all the time. Like, I know I got something to do and I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna watch TV. And then I just knew that if I was gonna die, if I didn't get this done, I would not be watching TV right now. You know what I'm saying? I would not. So that is a phenomenal rubric for people to put through, either at a micro level or macro level. In my job, if I knew I was not successful in my job, every quarter I would die. How much work am I not doing? What am I leaving on the table? And am I comfortable with this big of a gap? Because you shouldn't be. You should get closer.
Yes.
Get closer. That's the level of opportunity that's available to you.
We talk a lot. So we have 4 core values at Apex that we talk a lot about. Every Monday we have a North Star meeting, and at the very end we do core value call-outs. And so we read through core values every single Monday, and then we do call-outs of who lives it out. And we have 4. So 1 is own your shit.
Yep.
Right? Extreme ownership. Everything's your fault, no matter what. What is it that you can own in this situation? For the good and the bad. Be the shoulders, right? Who is it that can you be the shoulder someone can lean on and stand on? Plan and play to win is one, and then the other one, last one to this point, is empty the tank.
Yeah.
If you want an abnormal life, that's the 1% life. You cannot do normal people's shit.
Yep.
And so to this point, and that's not for everybody.
No.
Right? Like, some people love mediocrity and they're unhappy there, but they're unwilling to sacrifice, to your point. And so one of our core values is empty the tank. Leave it on the field.
I love that.
Refill it up. Now, part of own your shit is you got to learn how to refill yourself too. Because if you just leave yourself on the field and you're not refilling, well, eventually you're going to burn out pretty quick.
Yeah.
So that's why it's all symbiotic. It all works together.
I like that.
I want to talk about a few people from your past. Your grandfather. It's not your fault.
This is such a good lesson. This is my paternal grandfather, not my maternal grandfather. And he was a fun dude. He was a really fun dude. I lived down the street from him, and I played football. And I was a pretty good football player. Was in the paper a lot. And I had skipped school one day. And I was the starting safety, and I was the secondary running back. So I wasn't started, but I'd still, run in for plays. In that particular game, go figure, the starting running back went down. Then I was out. Then the third string running back was down. And then the fourth string. So they were pulling I don't remember how they did. They just pulled someone who had barely ever done it before because we had nothing. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, we lost the game. And they talked about it. And so in the paper it said, DUI loses to Norwell, I think it was, or Norwood or whatever. And, starting running back, Darren Meyer was down. backup and starting safety. Keenan was out on suspension, right? And it and it went down the whole list. And I got suspended for skipping school the week before. So that Sunday, I walked down to my grandfather's house, and he was sitting there reading the paper. And I sat down at the kitchen table with him, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" All cheery. I'm like, "Not much, Gramps. What you doing?" He goes, "Nothing, just chilling." And he just paused for it. He goes, "So, what happened?" And at first, I didn't know what he was talking about. "What do you mean, what happened?" He goes, "What happened?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And then he goes, "Come on, man. Like, I'm reading in the paper here. What happened?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah. I went." He goes, wait. It was your teacher's fault. And I'm like, no, Gramps. He goes, wait. No. It was Carl's fault. Carl's my best buddy. No, Gramps. I went. He goes, no. It was the coach's fault. I'm like, "No, Gramps. I wasn't." He goes, no. Don't tell me. Because I know it wasn't your fault. He wouldn't let me get a word out. He kept trying to find the person I was going to blame. And then was like, "Don't guess. Don't tell me, because I know it wasn't your fault." Man, I'm 55. I was 17, 16 back then. And it stuck with me. I got what he was doing. Right? I had a habit of blaming everybody, and he knew it, and he wasn't going to let me have it. He was not going to let me have it in a very roundabout way.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh shit," he got me.
It's huge.
Yeah, it was a big life lesson.
Who's Miss Solomon?
Miss Solomon, back to high school. Look, I think Miss Solomon probably had a way bigger impact on me than I let at the time. And boy, I'm sure if I was sitting in therapy and I had a really good therapist, she'd probably get me to break down, because my personality was a really big personality as a kid. So as you can imagine, teachers didn't like me. Most people didn't like me. I was just too much to handle. I didn't sit down. I didn't listen. I was a fucking mess. But I didn't do drugs. I played sports. I was a super hyper kid that just did what he wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? So I remember I went down. She was a guidance counselor. DY, Dennis Jarmuth High School, and on Cape Cod. And I went down to ask her about college. And I'll never forget it. She turned to me, looked to me, and said, "You're not going to college. Get back to fucking class." Just shut me down. Look, I get it. My grades were shit. So what she should have said was like, "Wait, you want to go to college? All right, Jimmy," because that's what they called me back then. "Look at your grades. You're not going to get into a college other than a junior college or a community college. So if you want to go to college, tell me why you want to go, and let's build a plan, because a traditional college, you're not going to get into whatever I was in at the time." No, she didn't do any of that. She's a guidance counselor, fucking job. And she was like, "You're not going to college. Get out of here. Go back to class." Well, now I would depending, and if you went back to my class, I'm pretty sure I'm in the top 1% earners. Mm-hmm. I'm probably the only person that's a published author that sold over 120,000 books. She could have destroyed me. If I was any other kid, she probably could have destroyed me. Maybe she did destroy other kids. Yep. But I was like, "Fuck you." And that's where I think I have a chip on my shoulder. I've had too many of those people in my life where half is like, "I'm out here. Well, fuck you then. I'll show you. Fuck you." Like Gap Selling. Not a single publisher would take it. Not a single one. So right now, all you publishers, fuck you. You get paid to find shit and you couldn't find it. So you suck at your job. Yeah, none of them would take it. So I've self-published it.
You read Patrick Bet-David's new book, Choose Your Enemies Wisely?
No, I like the title though.
You should read it. Mm-hmm. It's all about tapping into that dark energy of who's that enemy that really motivates me?
Mine is I've been told my whole life I'm not going to make it. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure they stopped telling me that a long time ago, but I'm not hearing it.
Well, and that's there is something about there's goals, but I think some of us are willing to settle short of our goals, but most of us are not willing to settle for letting someone else be right about our life.
No, hell no.
And so finding that balance between where we want to go versus also who do we want to prove wrong, or what do we want to prove wrong, or what do we want to destroy from a theory or a philosophy perspective with our work. Yeah. All right, brother. What's your final words? What do you got for these people? If you're sitting there, you got a CEO, you got a sales executive, you got a sales rep, you got a human being. They want something special for their life.
I think my parting words are design your life to be a good person. Just start with you and be real. Am I really a good person? Like really, like not I think I am, I want to be, but really, really, really self-assess. Like we started this whole thing about the importance of self-assessment, right? Like in all aspects. Do I honestly hug and kiss my kids enough? Do I ask them if I give them the right amount of attention? Have I asked my spouse, am I giving them the right attention? When not, do I hear them? Am I always defensive? Am I really, truly present? Am I trying to protect myself and my sense of self? Or am I opening myself up to vulnerability? Am I really willing to be vulnerable to feedback, to that I'm not perfect, that I have places for improvement? Am I really willing to be vulnerable with myself to say I'm not really where I wanted to be, and it's because I made these decisions, because I've closed off, because I'm afraid of being wrong, because I'm afraid of being perceived as a failure? Like, what insecurities allow driving your life? And get real with those. And then be very deliberate and ask, am I treating myself properly? And then from there, am I treating everybody else that comes in my life, directly or indirectly, with kindness and passion, driven from an empathy and a desire to understand that everybody in the world wants to be safe. That's all we want, is just to be safe, to feel safe. We were going to talk about LGBTQ, we were going to talk a little bit about race, but this whole idea that everybody's attacking these people just want to be safe, man. They just want to be safe. So, and same thing with immigrants. They just want to be safe, right? Same thing with kids. They just want to be safe. People just want to be safe. Are you part of making people feel safe? Or are you part of the place that makes them feel unsafe? You know, and we talked about immigration. It's a perfect example. You could be against immigration the way it is now, but if you read much of what people are saying, get them out, fuck them, we're giving them free shit, that's not making them safe. Making them safe would be like, hey, Democrat, Republican, these people need to come in here. Let's figure out a way to get them here so they don't have to go back and be persecuted. Let's work on a solution. Not let's just you're not making people safe when you're attacking them like that. Right? So, I just wish the whole world would commit and understand that we're all just people and we just want to be safe, feel safe with our spouses, our children, and our community. And that's not safe from crime, inner safe, just safety of emotion. So there you go.
We did it, bro.
Thanks, baby.
Empty the clip.
Pull up and empty the clip. Pull up and empty the clip. Pull up and empty the clip.